Welcome to part 2 of our video series Drawing a Graph. Part 2 is from table to graph. So let's first briefly recap what we need to do to draw a graph. So step 1 is always going to be make a table. We did that in the previous video. And with that table we can now draw the coordinate system, draw in the points, and finally draw the smooth curve through those points. If it's a quadratic formula, it needs to be a smooth curve. So let's have a look at the table we made the previous video. For the formula y is minus 2x squared plus 8, we got this table. So now we can draw the coordinate system. But first let's look at the values we have so we know how long the coordinate system needs to be, how long the axes need to be. So the x-axis, the horizontal axis, we've calculated from minus 3 all the way to plus 3. So that's what at least needs to be on the coordinate system. Steps of 1 is what we've calculated, so we can just use steps of 1 on the axis. For the y-axis, we all go from minus 10 all the way to plus 8. So that's a difference of 18. Which means if we take steps of 1, we need 18 centimeters in your notebook. So that's quite a big graph, so we're not going to take steps of 1. If we take steps of 2, we can take 9 centimeters, so that's already a lot better. We could also do steps of 3, but 3 is always a difficult number to divide in 3, because if we have 1 centimeter, it's never actually easily measurable, 1/3 of a centimeter, and it's going to be rather small. So let's do steps of 2, and to draw the graph we do need the squares, so there they are, and we need to draw straight lines. So let's draw straight lines for the y-axis. Sorry, this was the x-axis of course, and the y-axis. And then we can start drawing the graph. Of course, we do need to give some extra information. We need to tell that this is the x-axis. We need to tell that this is the y-axis, the vertical one, and we always need to show the origin, and from there we are going to count on the axis. So on the x-axis we're just going to use steps of 1, which means 1, 2, 3 at the lines of the squares, not in the middle of the squares, because this point is actually 1, whereas in the middle of between 0 and 1 we have 0.5. So always write your numbers on the lines. So we go to the left, minus 1, minus 2, and minus 3. On the y-axis we're going to take steps of 2, because we need to go to plus 8 and we need to go to minus 10. So 2, 4, 6, 8. And then we also need to do that going down, minus 2, minus 4, and so on. The y-axis does not have to have the same steps as the x-axis. In fact, it's often very impractical to do that, but it does need to have the same steps all the way. So if I start doing steps of 2, I need to continue doing steps of 2. So now we have our coordinate system, and then we can go back to the table and find the points we have to draw in. So we can always find the points looking vertical. If x is minus 3, then y is minus 10. I could write those as a coordinate. So first the x value, then the y value with a comma in between and in brackets. We don't need to do that when drawing a graph, but you do need to be able to do that. and we need to be able to find the coordinates. So x is minus 3, y is 10. So x is minus 3, so we go to minus 3. But then we also have to go y is minus 10, so all the way down to minus 10. And that's our point. Make sure that you actually show that this is the point you draw. If x is minus 2, we had y is 0. So if x is minus 2, then y is 0, which means we stay on the x-axis. If x is minus 1, y is 6. So if x is minus 1, y is 6. And finally, or not finally, but the highest point, if x is 0, then y is 8. And after that, we could see we went back to 6, 0, and minus 10. So x is 1, y is 6. X is 2, y is 0. And x is 3, y is minus 10. So now we have all our points, and because it's a quadratic formula, we don't want straight lines between the points. There are no straight lines on a parabola, and if I would calculate x is minus 1.5, it would not be in the middle between these 2 points. It would be closer to the minus 1. So we need a smooth curve, and it's called a parabola, but we have to try to make it look as good as possible. It's always difficult to really draw it, but it has to look at least a little bit like it. And I usually start at the top so that I can make the top to look as it should, because the top is not a point. It doesn't have a pointy end. It doesn't look like this, but it looks somewhat like this. So that's why I always start at the top, so I can make sure that the top looks good. And from there, I'm gonna draw it through this point. And I have to smoothly go faster and faster to this point, and my other points to way down. So I'm gonna draw this. This is, you see, it's fairly difficult to make it look good. Luckily, you have an eraser, which is why you always draw with a pencil and not with a pen. And I'm gonna go through the point. I'm not gonna go a long way through the point because I don't actually know how quickly it goes down. I can calculate it, but I don't need to. But don't stop at the point, because the graph does continue. We just didn't calculate any more points. And now I'm gonna try to do the same on the other side. And you see it's a bit wiggly, it's a bit, goes a bit wrong here, but it clearly is a parabola. It's an it's a downward facing parabola. It's a frowny face parabola, een bergparabool in het Nederlands. And we already should have known that because there's a minus in front of the x squared. There's a negative number in front of the x squared. We always get the frowny face parabola. If there's a positive number in front of the x squared, we get the smiley face parabola. But it's a negative number in front of the x squared, so we should get the frowny face parabola, and we do. So that's always a good sign. And now we have our graph. We've done all the steps, we've made the table, we've drawn the coordinate system, drawn the points, and now have drawn the line through the points, the curve through the points, because it's not a straight line. So this is how we draw the graph for a quadratic formula.